you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em. Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
And we are the GymWits.
So I want to just mention one thing. In a previous episode, you mentioned that I was trolling people on different forums.
Yes.
I actually looked up what trolling is, and really I'm not doing that. Like, trolling is making like fake accounts, saying like insulting people, mentioning things just for the sake of hurting people. But I like to engage in good debates with people.
I would disagree only in that those are examples of trolling, but what you were doing would also be an example of trolling.
How is that trolling?
I mean, it
like, I'm talking
blurs
with people.
the line.
It blurs the lines, but really, it's I'm not there for the sake of insulting people or hurting people. Yeah, I like to ruffle a couple feathers once in a while, but I'm not there for the purpose of that.
Were you holding on to this all week? Like,
No. I just
after we recorded, did you go look up what trolling is?
Actually, I was thinking about it, and I was well, actually, I looked up why is trolling so much fun.
Yeah.
And because I figured that's what I was doing, and people said, "Oh, there was all sorts of replies and answers." But when I looked at it, I realized that I really wasn't trolling, because the people who talked about it, they're like, "Oh, we make fake accounts and
well, yeah,
we
but
do all this sort of
that's
stuff."
going to an extreme level. I'm not saying like, you know, it's like, God, I'm trying to
spend a lot of time on it. I don't spend much time on it. I would write a reply here or there.
I'm trying to come up with an analogy, but each like analogy that's popping up into my head is really bad, so I probably shouldn't use it. So I'm not going to. But all
right, so just
I will. Okay, here's why. The reason why is I was just listening to a podcast that was talking about the sexual assault allegations that are going on and everything.
Okay.
So there's different levels or gradations, which is where it was used on the podcast. So I'm going to bring out an SAT word. So anyway, it's the same thing. Like, physically assaulting somebody is assault, and just as like, whipping it out and forcing someone to watch you masturbate is bad too. But there are different levels of or whipping it out and masturbating in front of them and not forcing them, I guess, to watch. Whatever the case is, like there are different levels, but they're both bad. So just the same thing. That's the only analogy I can come up with, because I was just listening to this, so I apologize. I'm not.
So you're comparing having a rational
I'm making an analogy. So what I'm saying is,
that's some analogy.
Creating fake accounts and doing all that stuff is trolling, just like what you were doing is trolling. It's just different levels of trolling.
I'm not really trolling, because I thought trolling was for the sake of like upsetting people and angering people. Like, that's not really what you were more.
It was like more focused. So you were trolling one person, but you can still troll a person.
Not necessarily one person.
You were. I mean,
trolling,
but you meant well. It's just, and I agree with you, and I think it's good. But there are times where there's I was telling a story about the guy that at the gym that was wanted me to spot him, and I wouldn't spot him, and then he kept bothering me, and to the point where he did something, and I just started laughing, and so that me laughing was to troll him. It was to get a response out of him, because he was being a dick, and he pushed me to the point where it's like, and so again. I meant well, and I think I was in the right in that situation, because he had made a nasty comment, and I would just laugh, knowing that would get a reaction. So there are times where you can still be a troll, but you're just
okay.
I don't know. I'm not thinking.
Right, so you're not necessarily a bad troll.
Yeah, no. There's just times I think of it as like, if you say or do something that is meant to get a reaction out of somebody, that you. Almost like an unproductive reaction. Like, if you were to take that guy aside and send him an email, say, hey, listen, here's what I think, and then you go into your explanation of why you think what you think. That, if you really wanted to get through to him, that's how you would approach him. But the way to troll him is to approach it the way you did, because you get him to go beyond rationality. He just it's an irrational response where he freaks out, and so you're trying to.
I got anyone to freak out. I gotta say anything that
you're trying to get a reaction out of him that is not productive.
I don't know if that's true. I don't.
What's productive about that
Nothing's
reaction?
productive about anything. Talking on the internet, having a debate, or having any argument or debate with anyone anytime for the most part, you know? So
Yeah,
unless you're debating because you're running for office.
For example, right now we're having this discussion. If instead of
So
trying,
who's trolling who?
Instead of so right now I'm not trolling you, but if instead of trying to get a reaction, I just started calling you troll, you're being a troll, you're being a troll. I just said that. That would be trolling you, like because that would be meant to get a reaction. But by actually trying to explain my perspective, I'm productive with it. I'm trying to get something. If that makes any sense.
Fair enough. All right. So
now that we wasted 5 minutes,
we trolled our listeners.
Yeah, sorry about
Sorry
that.
about that.
We totally could have talked about this before the show started, but instead we subject our listeners to yes, exactly.
All right. So you have an interesting study.
All right. So yeah, we got an interesting study for the week. So this one comes from NeuroImage, or was published in NeuroImage. So the article was in Silent. I read the article in Science Daily, which is where I get a lot of stuff there. Science Daily is one of my favorite resources for information. Anyway, it basically has to do with exercise and memory or cognitive ability as an adult. So as we age, so especially once you get past 40, you lose a good deal of brain volume. So kind of every decade, I think it's like 5% every decade that you lose. So what this study was to see how exercise impacted that kind of degeneration of brain mass over as you age. And so it was basically a review of 14 clinical trials. There were a total of 737 brain scans that were before and after aerobic exercise programs. So this study was kind of the different studies that it reviews are kind of all over the place because the age ranges from 24 to 76. I think the average range was 66. The programs range from 3 to 24 months. They range from 2 to 5 days a week per day for the programs. They vary from cycling programs, running programs, walking programs. So all of these are focused more on aerobic exercise. Okay. But what the study found was basically that, so I'm going to just read this. So this is a quote from the article in Science Daily. Overall, the results showed that while exercise had no effect on total hippocampal volume, it did significantly increase the size of the left region of the hippocampus in humans. And then it goes on. Lead author, postdoctoral research fellow Joseph Firth said the study provides some of the most definitive evidence to date on the benefits of exercise for brain health. And he says, quote, when you exercise, you produce a chemical called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which may help prevent age-related decline by reducing deterioration of the brain. So basically what these studies showed was that, exercise may not necessarily, it wasn't looking to see, will exercise enhance brain function, but more, will it stop the decline? And so you could look at exercise as we know it's great for many things, but also, and this isn't something we didn't know, but that it's a kind of maintenance for the brain. So in addition to everything else you need to do exercise for, brain function is also an area where exercise significantly benefits it. So
that's good to know.
There are a million benefits to exercise, and for anyone who kind of if you don't think so, it's even good for good and even necessary for brain function. So especially as you get older, you got to make sure you keep exercising, even if you're beyond kind of the aesthetic benefits of exercise, and even if you think, you're at a weight you're happy with, and you're happy with how you look, you still need exercise as you get older. So it's really, really important.
Makes sense. So on to today's topic. I'm going to start with a little story, basically that my girlfriend told me. She had gone to a group fitness class at her new gym, and she was not very happy with it. She said basically that the instructor, who had sort of that drill sergeant mentality, go, 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 wasn't really catering the class to the participants. A couple examples of this where there was a few exercises, because she hasn't been exercising recently, so she's getting back into it. And there were some exercises she was not able to do, and the instructor sort of insisted that she keep doing it. Oh, you could do it. You could do it. There was also another instance where she was doing a lunge, and she realized that her own form was bad. And basically that her sort of knee was at a sort of unsafe angle, and the instructor was sort of in La La Land, never even noticed. She had to make her own correction. So it was stuff like that. Funny, she also didn't really like the music, but that's a separate issue.
Such a sticking point in general. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's a sticking point. That that's based more on personal taste.
Yeah.
But as far as the safety and the efficiency of the class, and also the motivation, she found that it was not good, and she did not want to return to it. So she's been doing other classes. So I guess which brings us to our discussion about group fitness classes.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be learning a lot about this because Ryan is an expert in this. He's been doing them for a very long time. I know that I'm
an expert, but yeah.
I'm going to consider you an expert in it because you do it quite a bit. It makes up a substantial part of your income as well, or a decent part, right?
Yep.
And you've seen it all, and you've taught it at different places, from colleges, very exclusive gyms, more sort of gyms that are open to everyone, and so you've seen, you've seen it all.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be learning about this as well. And we know that group fitness is very, very popular. A lot of people join gyms just for the group fitness. And we know that some gyms are basically group fitness gyms. Like they might have their small workout area, but the main reason, NYC, right?
New York Sports Club?
New York Sports Club. That's based around a lot of group fitness, right?
They're not,
which is the one I'm thinking of that's
I don't know.
has like really based around classes.
I don't know. I mean, New York Sports Club has their own like studio. Like there's some boutique studio, especially in bigger cities. There are a lot of boutique studios that pop up, and you got like Soul Cycle and BFX and places like that where they cater to just classes. Like most or all of their business model is based on people paying a good deal of money to take group fitness classes.
All right. So
what are your questions?
I guess the first one is, what are the benefits of group fitness, and how do you go about choosing the right class?
Okay, so the benefits, they're pretty clear. Sometimes working out with a group, there's a camaraderie that you can get with a group. Now, some classes are more like that than others, so I think you're going to get much more of a group team feel in, like, let's say a CrossFit setting than you will if you just go to like a big box gym and you just take a random class. But you can even get that in those situations. You have an instructor that's basically telling you what to do, so it's kind of it's not quite personal training, obviously. And often it's far from it because it has to be more one size fits all, but it's nice to just have somebody who designs a program and tells you what to do and you just have to follow it. If you have a good instructor, you're having somebody that's watching your form and making sure you're doing things properly, but that's not always the case. So I think those are the main benefits to it. It's just motivating, it gives you something, you don't have to think, you just show up and you do what the person says, and hopefully you're going to get the results you want.
Some people might find it more entertaining as well.
Yeah.
They might do dance moves. It might be upbeat music, stuff like that.
Yeah. And then choosing the class, it really depends. It's, part you have to think of your level. So most gyms are going to give you like a level, what levels are in the class. And they'll tell you if certain things, it's important that if a class is level 3, let's say 3 being like the really intense, difficult class, and you're at, you're just starting, it's tough to take that class, even if it's something that you think, you'll suffer through it and you'll modify. Often, depending on the setting, it may be tough for the instructor to manage. So, that's not always the case. That's why I'm having a hard time saying that a rule is never take the tough class. But I think it's important that if you feel like you're taking a class that may be beyond what you're capable of, to talk to the instructor first and make sure that it's an appropriate class. I've had a lot of situations where I'll teach a class that is a level 3 class, and I'll have somebody come in who should not be there at all, and they don't tell me that. And so then I'm stuck either having to modify for them, which is tough. Sometimes, people, their egos and they don't want to be the center of attention. So you have to kind of delicately handle that situation. Or I modify things for the entire class to make sure that person doesn't have a heart attack. So, I think it's important that if you're taking a class or thinking of taking something that you're unsure of the level, to talk to the instructor. It's like I wouldn't go, I don't do yoga, so I wouldn't go to a yoga class that's like listed for, advanced. unless I knew I could make it, or I talked to the instructor and said, hey, I can never take yoga. Is there any way I could take this class and, you can modify it for me, or I'll do the easier versions, unless, so just kind of talk to the instructor first if you're skeptical about the class. But the other thing is, most classes are going to be more cardio conditioning based. Weights, you'll get a lot of weights, but even in the sculpting classes, they tend to veer on the side of like lighter weights. And when it comes to resistance training, you typically want to have heavier weights. So sometimes I think that the weights used in sculpting classes are just not heavy enough to really be as beneficial for your resistance training as you'd like. But that's not always the case. But I think in most group fitness settings, the weights don't go up that heavy. So, depending on the person and their strength, you may or may not need to, work with heavier weights. But otherwise it's really just making sure that the class is level for you, and then that you got to try it out and see if the instructor's right for you. Okay.
Now, speaking of the instructor, what is the role of the instructor?
It's a lot. When you're teaching a class, you wear a lot of hats. So you're designing a program. You're designing a program for the class. You've got to kind of observe the class. You got to make sure they're doing things properly. You've got to be able to handle even situations when there are conflicts between members. You have to identify when somebody is doing something that's going to injure themselves versus when it's just their form or their body. The thing is, when you're doing a class, is if I've got 40 people in the class, or 20 people, or 10, you can't give all your attention to any one person. So the level attention to detail is less than in a one-on-one training session. So you kind of have to figure out how much attention am I going to give to each person, and when somebody requires more attention than others, how much do I give until I need to focus on the class and kind of let them work things out themselves, if that makes any sense. So you're kind of wearing a lot of hats when you're teaching a class.
So how much should an instructor have to modify the class, whether it be the exercise or also, very importantly, the style, the way they approach the class? Are they a drill sergeant? Do they play only fast dance music? Right, those types of things. Yeah.
So there's a couple of answers to that. I think part is reading the room. So if you're new, and also it depends on how long you've been teaching the class. So for me, like I'm very specific on how I'll teach and what types of classes I'll take. And I'm stubborn enough, and luckily I'm at a point where I won't teach a class that I'm not comfortable teaching. So if I'm offered a new class and it's like something that is more of a choreographed class, or cardio kickboxing, I'm not going to take it because I don't like that style of teaching. Or if the members really want a specific type of music, I'm just not going to do it because it's not what I want to do. So for some instructors, you kind of have to decide. The more strict you are or inflexible you are with how you teach, the fewer classes you're going to take, you're going to get. But
and just about that, you have had people come up to you and say, you should do it more like this.
So I'll get to that. So so the first part is, let's say I take on a new class. So I'm not super rigid, so rigid that I'm unwilling to change anything. But if I take a new class and I find that the group, maybe let's say I take a boxing class and I find that the group's level is a lot lower than I expected, then I might change the way that I format the class in order to meet that level. Or if I take a new interval training class and I find that the group is way more advanced than I thought, I might modify how I teach the class to meet that group. So part of it is reading the room. If I start a new class and I find that there is a certain style of music that they like better, that they prefer, that makes more sense for that group, I may or may not make that change. But I think part of it, if you're taking a new class, is you got to read the room. For me, the other part is, if you have an established class and I teach that way, then the other part is, you're going to live or die by what you do. So if the members like your class, then that buys you your kind of cachet or your clout. So if I have 30 people coming to my class every week, I could play, and they're okay with how I do it. I can do what I want. So if somebody It's like, oh, I'd rather you do, change. It's like, no, I don't want to. Because for me, I teach too many classes a week. So the least stress, the better for me. So I'm very inflexible in that way as far as like how I format my class. If someone says, hey, can you do more abs or can you do more this, I'm fine. But if they're like, can you change the music or can you do more, bigger changes, I'm not going to change it, especially if it's a class where I got a big group. Now, if you're doing the same thing and you have 3 people come to your classes, then you're the problem. And so you maybe you can't be that inflexible unless you're willing to give up the class. So I think part of it is, if you have enough people, then it's fine. And so, and I know that I'm like a fairly polarizing instructor because of the way I teach. I'm not a big bouncing off the walls motivator type of guy. I'm not cracking jokes. I'm not yelling at people, but my workouts are good and the classes I teach are pretty good and people like it. So now, same thing with music. I try to play a variety of music because every week I get people that say, oh, I really like the music. And I get people who say, oh, I don't like this style that you play. Or like, for example, I'll play hard rock because I do a cycle of like all kinds of music. And so sometimes hard rock gets in there and some heavier things, and people tend to complain more about the heavier music. But it's like, well, whatever. Why are you complaining about the one heavy song when there's like 15 other songs throughout that some of which you'll like. So I try to play a variety to for everybody to, deal with. But yeah, I mean, it's part of it is, again, it's if it's a big class and you want the person to change how they teach it, good luck, because the people are there for a reason. And so if you don't like the way an instructor, the beauty about group exercise is that there are so many different styles and so many different instructors that for everybody that you hate, you're going to find somebody you really love. And I have that. Like I said, there are people who love my classes who one girl who in school, she made her school schedule work around like 4 classes that I taught. And even with work, like she made her work schedule work with classes. And then you have people that will take one and then walk out halfway into the class. So you just never know. And so that, that's what if you, somebody wants to take a class, you just kind of have to try different people out and see what you like, see what you don't, and talk to the instructors, and, you go from there. So let's take a minute to talk about Freshly.com, our newest sponsor.
So pretty much in any industry, people will tell you if you want something really good, fast, and cheap, you can usually have 2 out of the 3. Unfortunately, I found when it comes to food, you often get 0 out of 3.
That's true. No, and actually, as having tried Freshly for a bit, I can definitely tell you it really is 3 out of 3, and it definitely resolves a few problems that I have. So I've talked ad nauseum on this show about my issues with food, and part of my problem is that I spend too much money doing it because I don't have the time to prepare food for myself. I don't even have time to use a service that sends me all the ingredients and I make it. So I don't have time for that, and so I end up spending way too much money. So effectively eliminating the cheap part. And then I also end up making poor choices, constantly. Again, when you're left to your own devices, it's easy. I'm not alone in this, making bad choices when it comes to food.
And when you do cook, it's like you have to schedule. It's a whole night, and it can be fun, but it's like forget about doing anything else that night.
Exactly. So Freshly for me actually resolves a lot of this. And as I'm looking for the solution. So Freshly is a meal delivery service, and for as little as $8.99 a meal, you get everything sent to you. It's already made. It's already packaged. It's prepared by a chef. They're nutritionists on staff to make sure that it has the appropriate ingredients. It's made healthy and right. It's not frozen. And it really is. You throw it in the microwave, and 3 minutes later it's done. I put it in the toaster oven, and it works just as well for me. But it's a really, really a great service with some like awesome food.
Now, someone might be saying $8.99 a meal. There must be some very cheap ingredients.
No, it's quality ingredients. And just a wide variety of meals on the menu. Steak peppercorn I tried was great. There's raised rosemary pork that was really good. I tried
the turkey shepherd's pie.
That was awesome.
Good,
the meatloaf with cauliflower mash. There are also vegetarian options. So if you're vegetarian or vegan, there's no added refined sugars. If you have celiacs, it's gluten-free, it's peanut-free if you have any allergies. So they really, go out of their way to make it accessible to a wide variety of people.
Ask anyone who knows me and they'll all tell you how much I love food. Really good awesome tasting, delicious food. Of course, I'm also into this whole fitness and health thing. Yeah. And it's very difficult for me to eat something just because it's healthy if it doesn't taste good to me. And I know a lot of people are like that. So finding something that's both really tasty and healthy is like finding the Holy Grail.
Yeah, often healthy foods might taste good for being healthy foods, but they don't taste good when overall, compared to overall. But the Freshly meals are legitimately delicious. And each meal comes packaged with an ingredients list. So you know what you're getting and you can see right there in front of you that it's healthy, good for you, and it tastes great as a bonus.
Now, one thing Ryan and I were adamant about when we started this podcast is that we weren't going to take sponsorship from just anyone. We had to really believe in the products and services. So now we want to reward our listeners for making a purchase that we think is going to be great for them.
Yes. And I really believe in Freshly. So if you want to order from Freshly, we got a great deal for you. It's really simple. When you go to freshly.com to make your order, at checkout, use our promo code GymWits, all caps. So GYMWITS, if you don't know how to spell the name, which some people spell it with a Z, so that is important to point out. So GymWits, GYMWITS. At checkout, you get $40 off your first 2 orders. It's free shipping on every order. So you get 6 meals cooked by Freshly for $39.
Pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, so if you want a great meal and you want to put very little time into it.
And not too much money either.
Go to freshly.com.
Okay, so I guess that brings us to the next point is, when is it time to call out an instructor? When there's an actual problem versus something personal taste, like, I want different music, or I want you to be, Jillian Michaels type instructor. And sort of built into that, when is what an instructor or the way that an instructor is teaching is sort of going too far with like pushing someone? At what point should an instructor be able to identify when someone is not able to do something versus sort of being lazy?
Yeah. So that's a good question. Part of that is, so it's kind of 2 parts or 2 answers. So part 1 is as an individual. If you're working out, I think if you tell an instructor you're in pain, there's a part where as you get to know people, you get to find out. You could read sometimes when someone's being lazy versus when they're actually in pain. So as you get to know somebody, I think that shifts a little bit. But if somebody says there's pain, they're in pain. Like if someone says to me, I have an injury or my wrist hurts or my specific joint injury, not just, oh, this is really hard, then you immediately modify for them if there's any kind of pain. So I think, and I've heard this before, some instructors are just unwilling to modify. That's insane. And I've had this happen plenty of times where people will tell me that they were taking a class and they told the person that their back was hurting, and it was like, well, fight through it, just push through it. And it's like, if there's a joint issue or a muscular issue and you're in pain and you tell the instructor you're in pain, they should modify it immediately. Like there should be no questions about it. Sometimes like today, I just had this where somebody one girl used to take my class a lot. She hasn't been there in a while, but she came in today, and she's really, really, great shape, does everything. And I was doing a star jump where basically you jump, you extend the arms and legs out and you land. And she wasn't doing the jump. I looked, I was like, oh, that's weird. And immediately I knew, well, she must be hurt because she would be doing this. But I, asked her, what's wrong? And she said she had, she's doing some foot issues. So I just modified it right there for, okay, well, just, I told her what to do so that she can kind of get the same kind of workout without hurting the foot. So it's like, you should, we're a bad instructor, and I know people who do this. They'll just say, oh, just fight through it, just push through it. And that's a bad idea. So as an individual, now there is an issue I've had where, again, as I said, you have to decide how much attention to give to any one person. So, and what some people just are physically undeveloped, their brain body connection just isn't there. Yeah. And so, I'm not going to, in a class of 30 people, spend 20 minutes trying to get one person to do the perfect lunge. So, for example, there's one guy who just, I've never seen somebody as bad as far as his, like, the way his body moves and what he sees is not, so I do my best to kind of give verbal cues and correct him, but I can only do so much. So often, you've got to let him do the exercise the way he's going to do it. And, you'll get people who will kind of try to correct him in the middle of class, or they'll tell me, why aren't you correcting him? And it's like, in this situation, it's beyond what I can do in a group fitness class. You kind of have to make sure that that he's safe, that he's not doing something that's going to injure himself. But beyond that, you've just got to kind of let it go. And so some people will kind of call out an instructor for not fixing a person, but not realize why. Or you might have somebody like there's somebody who I actually train her, and she takes a class of mine. And she has really, really tight calves and really tight hamstrings. So when she does certain exercises, like her range and form just isn't great. It's good for her and it's getting better, but it's just not great. And so I'll get people that'll try to correct her form in class, and it's like, oh no, that's my job, and she's doing what she needs to be doing. Like, stay out of it. So I think there is it's a little tricky because you have some trainers who are aware of that and know what they're doing, and then others who just don't know what they're doing. And so it's a little tough watching a member who doesn't understand. No, there's a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. I've talked about this before. Also, I was working with a kid who had a number of physical issues, and his form was not great with exercises, but you work with that and develop it over time. And I'd have people try to tell me, oh, why is he doing it that way? He needs to do it another way. It's like, no, you're not his trainer. You don't know his background. Stay out of it. And so I think there is it's a little tricky to figure out when to butt in and when not to. But I think when it comes to the general rule is, stay out of other people's business. And when it comes to you, if you're in pain or if there's an issue and the instructor is ignoring it, then that's problematic. Okay. Sorry, that's a long answer to that question.
It makes sense. And I guess we already answered the sort of personal taste thing.
Yeah.
That you generally think that if the instructor does something stylistically.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So I don't want to say that there's a hard rule with this, but if you don't like something an instructor does stylistically,
yeah.
Should you mention that?
It depends. I think.
Or should you? Once again, it depends on the class. If there's 2 people in the class, maybe. But if there's 30 people and you're asking a big global change,
yeah, it depends. I mean, if it's a matter of like, hey, for example, somebody a couple weeks ago said, "I love it when you play soca music," which is a kind of West Indian style of music, and so it's like, I love it when you play that. If you could play more of that, that'd be great. So it's like, okay, when I go through my cycle of songs, I would have that in mind, maybe. But it's different if if someone's like, oh, when we do stuff, can you count with us? And it's like, well, no, that's not how I teach. And I've had people ask me that. It's like, no, I'm not going to count with you. That's not what I do. So, or can you do things to the music? It's like, no. I mean, so. You kind of have to figure out it's more of a judgment call, because there are definitely situations where people have made suggestions like that I value, and I guess it also has to
make reasonable suggestions.
Yeah, it also has to do with how you approach it.
Sure,
it's one thing to say like, again, there's a guy who would make suggestions and they were fairly reasonable, but the way he'd say it is like, oh, so and so used to do this and that and the other thing, and he was a great instructor. You should do it. It's like more demanding. And
of course,
then you have somebody who will be, like you kind of using flattery or compliment to say, I love that song. Can you play more of that? Or someone who came up to me recently and said, yeah, you haven't been playing as much of the heavier stuff. I'm glad. I like it. I like the music now. Like, kind of like subtly making that, so kind of, weird roundabout way,
gotcha,
making their suggestions. So, or like I teach some classes where I alternate every other week. What I do, like one week I'll do a circuit and the next week I'll do some more in place. And so most people tend to like the circuit, so they'll kind of say, hey, can we do more of the circuit training? Let's do it more, more often. So suggestions like that are fine. But again, it's like really depends on, it's more of a judgment call. And I think more than anything, it's how you approach the trainer. It's like if you're polite about it and you're asking it versus like demanding it, I think that there's a difference there.
So now, you talked about this a little bit, but what is some class etiquette? Like I know you mentioned maybe butting out of helping other people.
Yeah. It's not always, because there are definitely times where it helps for somebody to they're doing the job. So it's not always, but it's just like kind of, again, it's a judgment call. But yeah, sorry.
So yeah, what about other things like if someone's doing exercises and maybe taking up a lot of space, or sort of flailing their arm, or just doing things, or maybe making weird noises, or just things that might disrupt the class. Yeah. Sort of where's the line with that?
There are 2 things, a few things. I think the main thing is to consider personal space.
Sure.
It's kind of like being on the subway. If you get on a subway car that's empty, you have much more space. You can maybe put your bags down on your seat. But also at the same time, if there's one person on the train, you're not going to sit right next to that person and crowd them because you have an empty train. As the train gets more packed, you just accept that you're going to be tighter and tighter packed. And then, when it's a full packed train and everyone's standing, you just accept, like, I'm going to be next to this person. I might I'm going to be pretty close. And so, but you also are going to be accommodating to other people. So as the train gets busier and busier, you take your bag off the seat, you put the bag between your legs, you tighten up your own positioning. So I think when it comes to classes, just being understanding personal space and realizing that as the class gets busier, your own personal space shrinks a little bit, and you have to just be aware of other people. And so I think that's one thing, a couple pet peeves, like don't have loud conversations while the class is going on. It's kind of insulting and disrespectful to the trainer, and it's disrespectful to the other members. And there are a few classes where that happens, and it's distracting and it's frustrating to, for that to happen. Cause then it's like, and then the worst is when somebody's talking and then you demonstrate or whatever. And then like, oh wait, what are we doing? It's like, well, why don't you pay attention? So I think that's part of it. That's one thing to consider. Also, not talking to the instructor. Like I have people who will try to just have full on conversations with me while class is going on. It's like, this is great, but maybe save it for after class. Cause again, it's distracting. It's distracting to the trainer who needs to pay attention to an entire group. Cleaning up your stuff, like when you're done wiping down your things, wiping down your equipment, things like that. There's also like people like to set up sometimes early, so they get to the class really early, and especially in spinning classes, like they get the bike set up. But to also be aware that there are other people around. So if you're setting up, or if someone sets up before you, you can't get mad at them for you can't get mad if you do that all the time, and then someone sets up before you in your spot. Unless it's specifically reserved for you, places aren't reserved. So it's kind of first come first serve, and there's some people who kind of take an ownership of their space. And again, it's like, it's not your space. You don't own it. Even if you've been going there for 20 years, unless they designate that space for you, like someone gets there before you, it's their space. So,
all right. Yeah. So we sort of mentioned this earlier, but can you only do classes like if you just don't feel comfortable working out by yourself or in a one-on-one setting with a trainer? Can you just sort of subsist exercise-wise on only classes?
Yes, you can, provided you can get an adequate resistance training program in. Okay. So like I said, most resistance and sculpting classes, not all, but most tend to veer on the lighter side. So I think it's just the challenge is either finding a class that where you're able to do resistance training with heavy enough weights, or you have to just do that on your own. So I think you can mostly get by on only group fitness classes. Again, as usual, it's person specific. Depends on what your goals are. Depends on where you're at. So you theoretically you should be able to get by taking only classes as long as the intensity is appropriate for you, and as long as you can get an adequate amount of resistance training.
Okay. So I have an interesting sort of point next, and a lot of gyms are doing this. Mm-hmm. They have sort of specialty classes or special classes. Now, when we used to work out at Life Fitness or Evolution, they would bring in a jiu-jitsu trainer. Yeah. And that would be they would let you take one for free, I guess. Yeah. But then if you wanted to join, you would have to pay extra for that class. Now the whole school would come in and train there. Now, of course, you were welcome to join it, but you'd have to pay for it. Now a lot of gyms are doing that, where they'll bring in a skilled, and I don't want to say that doing group exercise is not skilled, but a very specific skill, like a martial art or dance or something along those lines. Maybe even yoga in some instances. And gyms are charging extra for it on top of their fee, which the classes are already factored into. Now, when you think about it, when special classes come in, it's taking up space in a class that you can't use, and it's also taking up studio space. That people like to use studio space in their own time as well. That is a big reason why people sign up for the gym. What is your feeling on special classes? Either the skilled ones, and then some are not skilled. Some are just other exercise classes that maybe they bring in a piece of equipment or something like that, where it centers around some sort of stylized training regimen. How do you feel about that?
I think they're great.
Gyms can do
so, I disagree a bit that group, like the studios are meant for group fitness.
Okay.
It's a bonus like that you get to use the rooms when
Okay.
they're available. Like when we were at Life Fitness, we used to use the group fitness room, but at the end of the day, those rooms are built out for group fitness classes. So yeah, so I think that part, I disagree a little bit that like if you're joining a gym, you know, there's always going to be space for you to do your own workout. It's just nice to have the open space. But, you know, at the end of the day, whatever you're going to do in the studio, you can do somewhere else for the most part. So I disagree a little bit with you on that. I do think, my only criteria is what makes the specialty class special. So, for example, I teach a TRX class. That's a specialty class. So members pay for it. But it's with a unique piece of equipment, number one. And number two, which is, you know, also we're limited with the amount of people. So, you know, you kind of have to filter out, you know, if we held a TRX class and 30 people show up and there's only 8 straps, kind of screwed. Like it's going to be hard to teach that. So by doing that, you're able to, you find another revenue stream. And also you can have a class that's limited to whatever, you know, you have set up for that class. So if you had a regular gym and they have these specialty classes, like, you know, same thing with the Pilates, many of the, like at the Y where I teach, there's they have like the Pilates on the reformer, and they have, you know, I don't know, 10 or 12 reformers. So you limit that class, and it's a paid class, but you have a specialty piece of equipment that is very expensive that you know, only a limited number of members can use. So I think you have to consider like, why is this class different? If it's, you know, boxing at my gym is at the Y, I take the boxing class there. I don't teach it. That class is a specialty class, but again, it's, you know, there are 2 instructors teaching, and it's a very high skilled activity. So, and something that you need people, you know, it's beyond just a group fitness. Like, you know, if you're just a group fitness instructor, you know, even if you go get like a cardio kickboxing certification, which is basically BS, you know, it's not, you know, you need somebody who's experienced, who has a skill to teach that class. So again, it's a separate class. You know, if it's like boot camp, that's different. You know, if it's like just your, you know, standard, you know, dance class, you know, might be a little bit different. But I think, you know, it's kind of what's unique about the class that to me would determine like why, you know, what's worth, you know, paying for it. And at the end of the day, I mean, if people are willing to pay for it, you know, it's like, we had this one instructor who I hated. We did not get along. We had gotten into a few arguments. But she was very popular. And at one point she had a class that had a lot of people, and she decided, you know what, I'm going to make this a paid class. And so that's what she decided. She was like, she had 45 people showing up at her class every week, and she didn't want to deal with that many people. So she just decided, I'm going to make people pay for it. If they want to come, they come. If not, they won't. And, you know, she still had 15, 20 people show up. And so,
is that fair to members?
I mean, that's the question. So, right, like then it's a bit of a moral issue. Like, is it fair?
Almost a legal issue in a weird way.
No, it's not a legal issue. I mean,
if you've signed a contract with a gym that allows you to take something, and then they take that service away.
Yeah, but you don't sign a gym saying that I'm going to take a class with Ryan George. You know, you're not.
But it does. But they give you the class schedule.
They give you the class schedule.
This class
but it's also
is available
it's
to
subject to change.
I mean, maybe legal isn't the right term.
I don't think it's illegal. I think it's a moral thing. Like,
sure.
You know, it is subject to change, and you know, I think the bigger issue is, I think there is a reasonable expectation when you join a gym that there will be, like, and you, especially if you join for classes, that there will be classes available to you at the appropriate times. So her class, for example, was I think a 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock Saturday morning class.
Okay, so that's
kind of tough.
Out.
Like, that's not, well, no, that's a busy time, because now she's no longer there, and I teach at 10:30, and I get 30, 40 people in that class. So, you know, it's a prime time for that gym. So I think that's the question, is it fair to those members who, you know, reasonably expect to have a class at that time, that now they either they have to pay for it or not. So I mean, that's its own issue. But you know, just as a kind of capitalist, you know, there's, you know, if the demand is there, then, you know, fine, if people are willing to pay for it. I just think though that you do need to be fair to your other paying members. So you can't just, like, you know, wipe out your entire, you know, you have to consider that if they're expecting this, you know, it's not fair to take away a class from them. It's fine if we take her away. And that's it. You know, what ended up happening after a while is people paid for it initially, but over the course of a year, people stopped paying for it. So all of a sudden, you know, she was only getting 1 or 2 people, and then she just gave up the class altogether. And actually, no, I'm wrong. I'm teaching what was once her class, because there was a step class that's always been there, and then there was interval, and then she made it paid, and then people stopped going, so then they gave the step class they gave the interval class to the step teacher, and then eventually the step teacher said, I'm too tired to do both, so you can take it. And then I took it. So actually, yeah. So, and then of course, like, because that's an in-demand time, I've got 30, 40 people in that class. So, yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah,
Right.
like, to answer that, I think specialty classes are fine. I just don't think that if you're joining a regular gym that has a normal group fitness schedule, you do need to be considerate of the members. And like a lot of the specialty classes at my gym are, well, we have 2 studios, so that makes it easier because you can always have, you know, separate classes. But the specialty classes typically go on like during odd hours, you know, or times when, or like
the non-peak hours.
TRX class I teach, we looked at the schedule and said, here are the open times? When can you fit it in? And we fit it in that way rather than like moving a class.
Sounds a lot more reasonable.
Yeah.
So I guess the last thing I'm going to ask, because we have a lot of trainers that listen to the GymWits, is what advice would you give to trainers, especially more beginning trainers that want to get into group fitness? Now, I know that you've preached get into group fitness because it's stable, but new trainers might not have as much experience. So what are some tips for new trainers that are looking to sort of branch out, maybe do some group fitness?
I'd say, you know, you have to find what works for you and what environment works for you. So like, I'm probably never going to be a group fitness instructor at like an Equinox or certain places, because I just don't have that personality for it. You know, maybe I could teach like a boxing class or a kickboxing class at one of those gyms, but the energy that the energy that I exhibit kind of in my, you know, and how animated I am when I teach isn't what you would expect or what you'd want at certain places. But I do really well where I do teach. So I think part of it is kind of finding the right environment for you. You know, also like if you're somebody who's bouncing off the walls, you're probably not going to you're not going to want to teach like, you know, the early morning class at a YMCA where everybody in the class is, you know, over 60, you know, 70, 80 years old. So you kind of have to figure out what your audience is. But I think also just be yourself, you know, what's good about your personality and find what works about your style. And, you know, I find structure, you know, so finding a structure for your class, but being flexible in your structure. So, you know, what I found is I always kind of have a loose idea of how my class will run, but I never am nothing's set in stone because you never know who's going to show up. Like, for example, even today, I had an idea of what I was going to do, which, you know, a lot of jumping stuff and a lot of high impact stuff. And in that first exercise, you know, when the woman was like, you know, hey, my foot's bothering me, you know, I decided, you know, she didn't ask me to change anything, and I'm sure she would have been happy to modify, but I just thought, you know what, it's a small class. Let me move. I'm going to change things around so that I could accommodate her. So there are times where you're going to need to accommodate people, or you just want to. So I think you kind of have to be flexible, but have some kind of structure, and just be yourself. And, you know, I would say start out in as low pressure environment as you can. Like my first class was at St. John's. And, you know, it's at a college kids, they don't know what to expect or what they want out of a class. You can kind of get away with it. And I'm lucky because I was, you know, if I went back to the classes I taught there, and I probably taught there for a couple of years before I was teaching anywhere else, I sucked. Like I was terrible. My classes must have been awful, but I was teaching it to college kids who didn't know any better. So, you know, it was fine. So, and luckily,
sort of learned there too.
Yeah. Cause like if I had started at another gym and taught like that, I never would have kept going because I would have been, you know, laughed out of the gym and, you know, wouldn't have been offered any more classes. But by the time I'd started to figure things out with the music and how to format and all that and how to really run it, I, you know, kind of had developed my own style. And, you know, when I finally took over, and I was also lucky that the Y worked for me too, because the members there, you know, not super, you know, not high maintenance, mostly not high maintenance, and they really liked me and they liked the way I teach. So it was, you know, so that way when I did branch out to like more demanding gyms, I kind of had more confidence in my style and in my ability to teach. So, you know, I think it's just part of it is give yourself you know, space to learn and grow as an instructor, and, you know, don't be afraid to fail, and that's it.
That's it. Oh, I guess there is one more thing, and you've talked about this, that trainers can, especially newer trainers, can learn, really any trainer can learn from. What about your dealings with other trainers that are using the room? You know, getting in, getting your equipment out, getting set up. I know that you've had some issues with trainers that have either gone late with their classes
Yeah.
or not removed equipment and stuff like that.
I mean, it's the same kind of thing. It's just be considerate. Don't be
always
don't be an
golden rule,
asshole,
right?
Because like if somebody is teaching after you, if most gyms should schedule like a 5-minute break between classes. But if someone's teaching right after you, you want to try to be accommodating and get your class out of there so that they can get set up quickly. And it's just simple being considerate. If things run over, like, for example, I teach a 30-minute class. And so since it's so short, I want to give them their time. And it happened one day where the trains were a mess and I was 5 minutes late. So I wanted to do the full 30 minutes. So it's just that, when their class was starting to line up, I just said to the instructor, hey, I'm sorry I was really late. We're running a little bit over. I'm really, really sorry. But, just make sure to let them know and be communicative and let them know that you're not just dismissing them and that you don't value their time or the space. That, I think that's the issue, is that not often, but you do get a lot of instructors that they just go at their own pace, and it's like they don't even care that you're trying to set up or you have a class going on. So just don't be an asshole is my my advice.
Okay. All right. So I guess that's that.
Cool. All right. Well, we have asked the trainers, but we're gonna have to save it because I am in a rush today. I gotta go to the doctor, and so we will save the Ask the Trainer then for next week. But as usual, all of our stuff is at the GymWits. GymWits.com. Forgetting our email is TheGymWits@gmail.com. You can submit your questions. You can submit them there at the email, or you can go onto the website where we have an Ask the Trainer form. If you want to be on the GymWits podcast, if you have something fun to share, you can also fill out a form there too. And that's it. Also, don't forget freshly.com. If you want awesome meals delivered to your home, use the code GymWits for an awesome discount. And that's it. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
One day I'm going to remember that you're going to say that. All right. And we are the GymWits.